Whatever role you play, whatever level you reach, whether you take the lead, the responsibility, the training, the corners, the kids to the game, or the nets down at the end, the game remains the same. It's the standards you set that make the difference. Accredited leagues and clubs lead by example, raise the bar, and fly the flag of respect and diversity for football in England. From the first time to the first team, from the boardroom to the changing room, from early morning pickups to last-minute winners, greatness isn't just earned by action on the pitch, but by the work, standards and spirit of it. Built to last, made by you. When you're accredited, you're not just part of it, you're the beating heart of it.
Hello everybody and welcome to this extra time webinar for accredited leagues and accredited clubs. We bring you the insight, the information and the inspiration to try and help you be the best league and the best club you possibly can be for all those people that come and engage with you week in, week out. I'm Tom Lee, National Club Services Manager for the FA, as well as an In The Box podcast presenter. I'm of course joined by the wonderful Charlotte Richardson.
Hello, Tom. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you all with us because we are talking and building upon the subject of marketing and communications, which for some of you, you might know already, is my favourite subject, Tom. And we're going to be focusing on all about knowing your market, which might be a phrase that some people are unfamiliar with, but it's about having that focus, looking at different platforms. And we've got a fantastic guest alongside us to delve into the detail.
We certainly have Charlotte. So yes, being on target with your market is key, and it's well worth introducing the guest that we've got lined up today. We have got Mark Bradley from the Fan Experience Company. Mark has realms of experience in this space. I'll let him do his own introduction in a minute, but we know it's critical to make sure that we engage with our fans, spectators, whether that's from the grassroots pitch, and that's the parents of the players and the grandparents that come along, right through to our National League and women's football pyramid clubs, where we're looking to engage more fans and in particular families and give them a well-earned experience. That's what at the end of usually a tough working week for everybody. So welcome, Mark.
Good morning. Nice to see you too. Thanks for inviting me on again.
No worries, Mark. Thanks so much for coming on board. And as we mentioned, the sort of theme and subject of our extra time webinar is around targeting your market. And I suppose let's take it back to the start, really, by defining exactly what marketing is. And often if people ask for a definition from me, I kind of explain it to be something where you're kind of exploring, you're creating, you're delivering value to meet the needs of your kind of stakeholders. And I really like the point that Tom made, because this webinar is focusing on the diverse range of people that our clubs and leagues need to service. That goes from volunteers to supporters to players and so on. The list is endless. I just wondered, from your point of view, what does knowing your market mean?
Well, it gives you an advantage. I mean, as you say, Charlotte, that marketing. If marketing doesn't have an intended market or a target group of people at the end, then it's simply selling. And if all you're doing is selling, then what you're not focused. You don't have a particular person in mind, and as a result, that selling then becomes rather generic and can be untargeted and unfocused. So I think the key thing about marketing is to recognize that, selling your club and promoting the services and the experience that you can offer the community is really important. But without a clear idea of who it is that you're particularly interested in, then it's likely that there's a risk of actually just continuing to work with the same group of people and actually not growing at all, but staying the same size. So I think it's really important that we think about a particular target in mind rather than just generally hoping that our efforts to engage will get more people coming along to matches.
Okay, so let's take it on then to the targets, to the markets and so on, and focusing on 3 key targets I think will be most useful for those joining us and catching up on this extra time: players, volunteers and match day.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, they're three. I think they're good because, if we're dealing with non-league clubs and community clubs, and all three will have an interest in doing that because that's fundamentally what it is that we do. But yeah, so you've got players. Where are the players that we want to attract? How do we reach them? How do we engage them? How can players themselves be used to recruit and get the word out about our club and what makes it special? I think with volunteers, obviously that's an age-old challenge to get volunteers to come to the club. But again, asking that question, what particular type of volunteers are we after? Where are we going to find them? How do you access volunteers? And of course, what are we going to do to make sure that when we do engage them, they appreciate and enjoy the experience so much that just in their chats with other people, they talk about it. And of course, that word of mouth leads to more. And then finally, the match day experience itself. As Tom and Charlotte and many of the people that watch these shows know, we're involved in assessing accredited clubs' matchday experiences, and that's usually very interesting because the experience that you get as a first-time fan often gives a big clue as to the extent to which that club is trying to appeal to a particular group. So we can kind of look at those three things in a little bit more detail. Players, I mean, Charlotte, from your perspective, you know, from the clubs that you work with, what would you say would be the two or three key things that are important in terms of targeting players to come to your club?
I think for me, listening to everything that you're talking about there, it comes down to that sense of community and understanding what your identity is. And for those that have been a part of the club's program in particular, they'll know and understand why we put such an emphasis on deciding and clarifying what your identity is, and then using your different channels to kind of broadcast that. I think as players, you have to think, what's that individual's need going to be? It's going to be probably to play football with a smile on their face, to get access to game time, to feel a part of something. And I think using social media and free tools like that is so useful for clubs, for putting an image out there of themselves, for communicating what their identity is, and then in turn being able to attract people to that, which leads me on quite nicely actually, because I know we are focusing on players, but I think it's useful for people to take away examples and perhaps best practice that you and I have seen. One of the clubs I work with, Sevenoaks Town, like many across the country, are always on the lookout for volunteers. So during the off season, we did a Support the Oaks campaign where we just used what was already within the club's resource, and that was a very strong mailing list. And I think a lot of clubs don't realise perhaps the data that they sit on and that they have access to communicate to people with. So we just created a really simple graphic, a support the Oaks tagline, and built some copy, really trying to engage with people, telling them that they would be a part of a volunteer family, the rewards of volunteering, and so on. And we put that out through the database and on the social media channels, the website. Didn't spend a penny, but managed to recruit 8 really good volunteers, which I'm sure everyone with us will realise and appreciate are worth their weight in gold. So I think sometimes it's just thinking about who is engaged with you now and how can you utilise them best, and communicating what your values are. Because if your values are right and your identity is strong, whether it be players, volunteers, or those coming down on a match day, they're going to be attracted to what you're doing and want to find out more.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And I think what you talk about applies both to players and to volunteers, that sense of what type of club are you joining? What makes this club different? A son of a friend of ours has actually left a club further up the pyramid to join a club further down the pyramid simply because he gives him more enjoyment. There's a much more of a relaxed culture about the club. It is all about the football and the joy that comes from playing, and the whole style of leadership in that club appeals to him. And I think sometimes, as we said at the start, the risk of not thinking through, seeing marketing as about finding and identifying particular groups is the same with identity as well. Most clubs know that people will be interested in them if they're interested in football. But I think, as you say, having a strong identity, having perhaps a few descriptors on the website and in the communications that you do, having a set of values that guide what you do, then act as a kind of a filter for things like communication on social media, so that there is a consistent tone that kind of underlines what it is. So I mean, this is just a simple idea, but if you're you're trying to present yourself as a diverse, inclusive, open, friendly club. What does that mean for things like communication? I mean, it does mean a very particular tone of voice. When I do assessments, for example, we will have, I think the PA announcer is something that we always see something of the character of the club in. So more often than not, the PA announcer, will focus on the key information if the club has a PA and uses a PA. But it can be a massive opportunity for those people coming to the game for the first time to understand something of the character of the club. And often we'll get a self-deprecating PA announcer who, through his or her dryness and wry observations, conveys something of that club. So I think when it comes to attracting players and attracting volunteers, that tone of voice, that identity, that feeling of what is it that I'm joining here, I think is really important.
I've always said as well, Mark, when you do attract the volunteers as well, it's really important to empower them and to be as welcoming as possible once you do get that volunteer making that interaction with you, whether it be a reply on social media or an email. So important to engage with them on the off. And one subject I wanted to touch upon as well is linking in with all of your experience. You mentioned all of the assessments you've done across the football pyramid around match days, because believe it or not, as we're recording this, we're hurtling towards, for most people, the end of the season, which is actually quite good timing because we do have the off season, and after taking on board some rest and rejuvenating, it is an opportunity to plan. And we're seeing a lot more within the non-league game and for community clubs, a real urge to drive and boost attendances. How can those on the call target new supporters to come and watch their team, no matter what level they compete at?
Well, the first thing to do is to identify who is it that you want to come to games. I know that you and I are going to talk a little further in today's show about the approaching women's Euros and what opportunity that presents. But more generally, who is it that you would like to come to games? I think it's such an important question, and if you can answer that question, you're already ahead of the competition. It's so important just to have that idea in the back of your mind. Who is it that we want? So let's say, for example, that you want to get kids to come to the games. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because you're looking at the next generation of fans, the next generation of people who will grow up supporting your club, and who will hopefully become lifetime fans. Now, children come with families. What is it that families want from any experience that's a leisure experience? Well, there are some obvious ones. They want to be able to do something together, but which has appeal for the different members of that family. I think that's really important. So straight away you start to think about, well, what is the asset that we have as a club that would appeal to a family with young children? And you start working through that match day experience. And there are two or three that stand out straight away. A friendly lounge, a social club, a warm room in general terms, somewhere where people can shelter, given the English weather, where they can spend some time before the game. And that's a huge asset to start with. You've got opportunities to, there might be someone in the family group who's not a big fan of the football, but who can then enjoy the experience, the social aspect of that. I think another one is quite a broad one, but it's one of the assets that our game has at community and non-league levels, and that's the freedom to be able to, move around. I was at a game at the weekend, and I think I sat or stood in 4 or 5 different places to get a kind of, the full experience. For kids in particular, not being nailed down in one seat and be able to move around, perhaps kick a ball backwards and forwards, run around outside and work off that energy. That's going to be really important too. So I think having an idea of specifically who it is can start to open up a recognition that actually beyond the game itself, you have other assets which can then work to that benefit. I remember talking to Steve Hobson up at Ashton United about some of the things they did in terms of getting engaged with the older community. Steve and his team had actually got involved in doing some social survey work to identify, what were the biggest issues in the whole kind of Oldham area. And one of the specific things that came out was a theme of older people feeling quite isolated, feeling lonely, and actually being a little worried to go out of the house, which is natural. You know, you read any newspaper in the UK, and you might decide to stay in the house for the rest of your life. But I think what they did specifically was organise a match day club for older people, so that they could gather and they could socialise, they could have a cup of tea, and if they wanted, they could then stay on for the match. And I think that's another example of using that lounge. That if you're lucky enough to have the facility to have a place for people to gather, that can be really, really powerful. And I think I'll just conclude this section by saying that when you look at the assessment results, so the detailed assessment reports that we undertake up and down the country, what we often find when we first engage on social media, as often as not, it's social media that we engage first, but also on club websites, you still often get the sense that this is about a football match and it's less about a community experience. So connecting what you said before, Charlotte, that sense of identity, what makes us different, and how do we bring that alive during the match day experience on a match day, including features such as the freedom to run around, the opportunity to use the lounge to be able to do other things when you come to the game, I think is really important. And that fits in with this whole idea of having a specific group in mind. And I think that's the kind of the spark, that's the catalyst that starts to get you to realize that, oh, we have all of these assets, we can do all of these things, you know?
Yeah, I think that's spot on advice. Think about who that group is and then work from there. And as you say, if you're lucky enough to have a facility or space, how you can maximize that. But often or not as well, what I've found has tended to be so useful when it comes to that match day is trying to utilize the players. It doesn't matter if it's a Premier League player or a non-league footballer or someone in the under 18s, particularly if you're targeting families and young supporters. If you can try and engage with your players so that there's a part of the match day where they know to go over to that specific area, a high five wall. I remember visiting one club that just dedicated a little stretch of their stadium, of their ground. It was a non-league club actually, right by the players' tunnel, and there were young supporters encouraged there to go and high five. And now that COVID's over as well, I think that kind of connection with the players is really important. One little tip I would give for those that perhaps, again, don't necessarily have the facility, but are looking at things that they can do, having a dedicated section. Matchday magazines are often a requirement for clubs at all levels of the game. Having a section there that's dedicated to youngsters and maybe just putting in a little drawing section or something like that, just by adding that to your Matchday magazine, will show that, again, you're looking to try and reach out to families. You've got that little touch point. And also, again, as someone that's had to edit a Matchday magazine and they come at you thick and fast, it's also a page of content sorted out as well. So it's a win-win situation. Tom, I know, wants to jump in with an example as well, because Tom, you have seen so much football across the pyramid as well. And I know that this is a subject you are also really passionate about. What good examples have you seen?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about when I first started my club back in 2009. Some of the experience that I had starting out, I was very young at the time. Our club was established in one of the most deprived areas in the country. We played on a council estate pitch. We was reliant on the local authority to cut the grass, and we often had a lot of things to clear, debris, things that had gone on. And as you can imagine, very few volunteers doing everything from organising the match day, the players, everything off the pitch, setting the pitches out. So obviously within mini soccer, those that are listening will know you've got the respect barriers to put up, the goals to put up, the corner flags. And we're based in one of the most deprived areas in the country. And when it came to a match day, we had that much debris and stuff to clear off the council pitches and stuff just to get ready, that I never really thought about the experience of them coming, because I was just solely focused on the players. But as we grew and as we established, a couple of things that we just started to introduce, because we didn't have a warm room, is we recognised we had a lot of grandparents from the estate coming to watch their grandchild. And obviously Mark mentioned the English weather, is we just managed to put out a table in a TN. So we had something warm for people to enjoy when they came, and we just asked for a contribution that went back into the club. And we also just had a big bucket that had the old like picnic chairs in that people donated to us. So those that wanted to come and enjoy the game could come and actually sit down and take a seat without having to bring all their stuff along. So there's a couple of examples there, I think, where if you haven't got the scale of the non-league and you potentially haven't got a facility to be able to house people, you can still do little things like that that helps just with the experience of giving some refreshment, something warm to drink and enjoy, and also offering a bit of seating when you haven't got a stadium.
Yeah,
And
that
then
point you made, Tom, about warmth. When we were working in Estonia, obviously a Nordic country, working at grassroots levels again, trying to get the clubs to start thinking about growing attendances rather than just playing a game of football. Believe it or not, it was a cup of hot tea that was the catalyst there when people started to think, well, what have we got that's our biggest challenge? And people said, well, it can be minus 25 in February. So that was the first thing that came out. And it's a small thing, but once you do that one thing, as I'm sure you discovered with your own club, that then leads to other things and other things. And eventually you start to realize that you're actually capable of attracting 4 or 5 different types of people, to your growing club.
never ever underestimate the value of a cup of tea, not only for your volunteers, but sparking a conversation. Absolutely, absolutely. And Mark, I want to move our conversation on a bit, because this webinar is all about focused on making marketing something that clubs interact with, because more often or not, it tends to be something at the back of people's minds, when really, if you're looking to be sustainable, efficient, and work effectively, good marketing and communications will help you get there. And I want to make it as easy as possible for our volunteer run clubs. And one thing that I think sometimes gets a little bit overlooked is building up a dialogue with people. I often say that marketing, and as a marketeer myself, you are the eyes and ears of your organization, whether that be a league or a club. So on that note, on the ears, how can clubs listen, build dialogue, and have you got any examples of when that's worked really effectively in helping a club or league develop and experience success?
Yeah, I think when it comes to dialogue and listening and feedback, you could describe that as a weakness in football. I guess, more than an opportunity. That there is a sense that when people are working incredibly hard, especially, volunteer run clubs as we all are, the sense that someone's going to come in and say, actually, you could do this better. I think we sometimes fear inviting that kind of feedback. So, but it doesn't have to be a formal survey, it doesn't have to be a focus group. It's just the idea of getting some feedback informally. As you said, Charlotte, the magic cup of tea, just actually sitting down and asking people, taking, 5 minutes out of every match day and saying, right, for 5 minutes, and I've got a multitude of tasks to perform, even, for training, coaching, for the match day itself, whatever it is we're doing. But I'm going to make a point for 5 minutes of just saying, so what do you think? We're trying to build the club. Is there anything you think is missing? Is there anything we could do differently? And I remember speaking to Stuart, who's been a guest on this program before at Lewis. And one of the things that they did over there early on in their journey was to speak to 2 or 3 of the families who had people who were on the board, who were basically helping to run the club, and asking their wider families to come to a game and just generally pass on their feedback. Not make it a formal, complex kind of audit, but just simply saying to someone who hadn't been to the club before, you do me a favour, would you come down? Would you just bring your kids? We're trying to attract more kids to the club. I'd be really interested in what you thought about it. And I think that takes that slight fear out of it. That fear of perhaps being seen to criticise. It's not that at all. So I think that's really important. And given that we have the free channel of social media as well, I think it's important that clubs say, look, we're interested in hearing from you. We want everybody in the community to feel welcome at this club. So what's your experience been? What do you like? What do we do well? What could we do more of? So I think that's a psychological barrier, I think, more than anything else, because there are certainly many ways of doing that. But I think it's just getting beyond this psychological barrier that says, even though we're putting 24/7 all of the spare time we've got into this football club, that doesn't mean that we're not interested in hearing how we could do things better or more differently.
I think that's, again, a really good bit of advice, and important to relay to people in that pursuit of wanting to be better, in that pursuit of becoming more sustainable. It is important to ask for advice. And of course, when people are giving up their time, like you say, it's something that you have to kind of manage carefully. And I suppose, in my experience, the best examples have been when clubs have reached out via email, say that I've purchased a ticket online, or they've had some kind of interaction with me where they've got my email address. they've then followed up with a sort of quick survey. But as you mentioned, again, with social media now, there are so many ways of just popping up a poll or a quick question on Instagram. One thing that we did recently at Bromley Football Club, which who I work for at the moment, we put up a Spotify playlist on match days, and we were sat there in the office like, oh, what songs should we add? And then I said, well, why don't we ask? You know, we're scratching our head having debates about all of our musical taste. We have the opportunity to put a Spotify playlist out there, and you wouldn't believe how many people not only engage with it, but were just really pleased to be asked. And I think that's the kind of example of just thinking, well, if you feel a little bit unsure, or if you feel a bit presumptuous, just ask others, and it's always going to kind of be appreciated and go down well. On that note, it leads to another topic which often comes up with marketing and communications. Actually, it comes up with every single subject to do with football and managing a club or a league, and that is resource. It's getting those bodies to help. And I'm sure, again, you have come across many examples of clubs and leagues that have utilised local opportunities to build resource. Are there any examples or tips that you can share with us?
Well, I think, again, not forgetting your assets. The fact that you've got kit that you can give people when they come to volunteer, that's actually seen as a big, as a big thing for many people. That makes them feel part of something. So again, start from the point of view that you have something that is really positive. You have an opportunity for people to get involved, to give back to the community, and you can effectively recognize them by giving them something that makes them feel part of something. So I think never overlook the fact that, what you have is something that people want, and actually there are some intrinsic elements of recognition in that will make people, feel really good about helping you out. But I think you should also look beyond the typical volunteer. I think it'd be interesting to know what comes to mind when people think of a volunteer. Is there what mental associations do our volunteers make when they think about the other people they want to attract? Because there are people everywhere. You've got students, for example, who are maybe studying business, maybe studying marketing, maybe even studying sports specifically, who are looking for experience. Many of the clubs out there who'll be listening will say, well, yeah, that's what we did. That's how we managed to develop our social media, because we actually had a student that was studying it and who really valued the opportunity to come and manage it for us. Even in areas like sales and marketing, some clubs have developed what's effectively a trestle table with a couple of mugs, a hat and a scarf on, to something that's an online offering that's making the club money, even though they're operating at a very low level comparatively when compared to where you might expect to find a club shop. They're actually making that work because they've found that students are a great way to start. Yeah, a lot of people are saying retired people, but actually what the pandemic has done is thrown in the air a lot of things that we used to take for granted, such as that everybody works from home, and actually, everybody works from an office, but actually now a lot of people are working from home. And by definition, they need to break up that day. So I think the paradigm has shifted a little bit in terms of who might be able to come out there and help us. What's been brilliant, and what I've seen across Europe, as you know, we've worked in places like Moldova. And what people in Moldova are doing now is really embracing the challenge of looking after so many displaced Ukrainian families and offering free training to those kids. Now, our communities are much more diverse than they used to be. As I've argued previously, we have people who are now moving away from the town in which they perhaps work, because it's more affordable to be further away, because it's easier to commute than it is to buy a house. So we've lots of new people there as well. And I also think, finally, one of the things I would add, which applies not just to commit to volunteers, but also players and also the match day, and that is not forgetting old school marketing, things like posters, things like leaflets. I mean, I remember getting 5,000 leaflets printed for less than 50 quid that just 2 or 3 years ago. And those are a great way to get your personality as a club across, but also to put them up in places where people are likely to see them. It's not something I don't see ever posters saying, would you like to come and volunteer at our football club? It's not something I see when I'm out and about. So I think those old school things help as well. So I think with volunteers, as it is with match day, as it is with players, it's actually starting the thought at the point of who is it that we want to actually attract, and then work back from there.
I'm nodding away furiously because I think that is such a good point. And you mentioned the old school techniques. I think one piece of advice that I would give volunteers and those joining us listening to this webinar is to have that blend of, utilize your digital. I know the instinct is to go on social media, those free assets, but like you say, printed materials as well. There might be a little bit of cost attached, but they can be really worth it. And in this age where we have a lot of adverts placed at us, a lot of sponsored activations, your feed can become quite cluttered, can't it? And actually being given something physically or placing in local communal notice boards and so on are a really good opportunity. The local supermarket, the local library, take it right back to that community, and where you want to be is at the heart of it. And football is often at the heart of its local community, but have perhaps a little think of other good groups around you, other core community-led activities around your local area, and that's going to be very different depending on where you live, and then try and get yourself in the midst of that. I'm going to bring Tom back in now, because for the final phase of this webinar, we're going to focus upon a really exciting opportunity, because we have the Euros coming this summer. I talked about a relaxing summer, but no, this is going to be huge for football, and I suppose in particular the opportunity to get more women and girls engaged in the game. And Tom, it's a hugely exciting opportunity, isn't it?
It certainly is. Obviously, we're on a drive to give girls equal access to football in both schools and clubs, and the landscape out there is growing vastly. Obviously, the women and girls game is I'd say thriving now in terms of where you can engage with it. It's on terrestrial TV, and having a major tournament on home soil this summer, which kicks off in July. First game against Austria at Old Trafford is something that we should all be really, really excited about, and I can't wait for it. Obviously, a bit of a delay because of the pandemic, but it's finally going to be here. And I'm sort of going to lean into you two with being our marketing fan experience experts to piece together a bit of a live case study, if we can, just to give some top tips to clubs, depending on scale, and obviously try and have a blend of them methods between old school marketing and using the social media, the platforms and stuff like that. If a club was to utilise the Euros this summer to engage in new fans, but more so volunteers and players that want to engage in a club, where should a club start when thinking about using the first fixture right through to the final at the end of July?
It's a really good question, and I'm very glad that Mark is on this call, because I'm learning on the job here as well, listening to all Mark's advice and experience. But I will just tell a quick story of when I worked for a charity called Women in Sport, and we held a sort of session like this around marketing and communications about how to engage women and girls with activities. And we had loads of different grassroots clubs and organisations attend, and we asked them to bring one marketing material that they use to try and get more women and girls active. And no word of a lie, this lovely volunteer from a badminton club came and held up a poster with great pride to advertise to women and girls, and there wasn't a woman or girl on the poster. Instead, it was all images and animations of men. And I make that point in jest because volunteers, we have so much going on our plates, and we want to get stuff out there, we want to get it out there quickly, but visibility. And you said, Tom, this tournament is going to be on terrestrial TV, so already everyone on this call has that helping hand, because the visibility is going to be there. If you have the means of organising an event, I would look to do something like that. Use the opportunity to host an event where it's as a bigger welcome as you can possibly do. But when you're doing so and you're creating promotional material, whether that's a piece on your website or an image to go on social media, or as Mark was suggesting, putting a poster up in your local community, think about who you're trying to appeal to. Don't necessarily think, because it's women and girls, it has to be brandished in pink and purple and so on. I'm not saying that. There's advice and support actually to help advise that. But do think for women and girls, it's really important that they see themselves in what you're producing from a marketing angle. So that's one little piece of advice I would give. Just to have a little think about how you want to position what you're advertising, and make it as inclusive as possible. And that is, in some cases, making sure that women and girls are prominent on the promotional materials themselves.
Yeah, from my perspective as well, it goes back to one of the assets that we pick up on when we're doing our assessments. And the one in particular I'm thinking about is those of us who are lucky enough to have a TV and a lounge, because that TV then becomes a massive asset. I mean, many of us will put a game on if there's a lunchtime game, for example, and we know that is an asset. People will come in to see that game. They might spend some money at the bar. We'll hopefully have loads of kids sat around with crisps and drinks and things like that. But when it comes to the Euros, that gives us the opportunity, with us not having a game on, to actually create events around that single asset that we have. So getting people to come to the game, to bring the girls and to bring the boys, but to bring everybody to celebrate the Euros at your club. And that then gives you the opportunity to tell the story of your club, to effectively make it an open day, a community open day around the club, to talk about opportunities for girls and women to play football, to explain something about the player pathway, to explain about the levels of support that they get, to underline how good we are at safeguarding, to talk about those opportunities. But it comes back to the television up on the wall in the corner of the bar, which is going to be a massive asset as we move forward through this exciting period.
Tom, I think Mark makes a really good point there. It's a combination as well of the football opportunity with the social. One thing that we're planning at one of the clubs that I work at is to host like just a football little five-a-side tournament before England's first game, and the timing of England's first games are actually quite good. I know in particular there's a couple of games on a Friday, so actually again taking it right back to when is the game being played, what are the opportunities. Friday evening is quite a sociable time. If you can put on some food and drink, brilliant. But it's about offering that playing opportunity, but also perhaps for those that might be a little bit hesitant. We know with women and girls, there are certain different factors as well when it comes to them wanting to play and get involved. A few more additional hurdles, trying to make it a kind of really friendly, warm environment when an individual can take part to whatever degree they can. Maybe it is just having a cup of tea and a chat initially, and then building their confidence up. And there are loads of kind of resources I know on the FA's website around how to appeal to women and girls specifically. So I would recommend people go and check that out as well.
I think I would. Sorry, Charlotte. I would also, I know I'm obsessed with assets that our clubs have, whether they're community or non-league. But another asset we have is the bar. And in the past, I think when we've done our assessments, and you can probably tell by looking at me, we've done this for many years, for more than a couple of decades. One of the things is the bar. I think in the past, before our clubs really started to understand inclusion and diversity, the bars were usually a reflection of a quite austere, male-dominated game. And, I could name the typical products that might be available for sale on the bar. But what does a bar offer that is inclusive? What does a bar offer that's interested in getting women and girls coming to games? And I think, I'm not going to go into the detail about what that might be, but we know that many of our clubs, and I remember, again, I'm always mentioning Wendy Newey in the Neen Valley Community Centre. That was one of the biggest things they did, which is to actually stand back and look at what they sold at their bar and wondered whether that actually just attracted a certain type of person. And by making some changes, they were suddenly able to change perceptions from a football club to a community centre, because that bar reflected what everybody wanted to have, what everybody would like to drink on a Friday evening, for example. So I think, again, look at your assets. I know some of us at the start of that journey, and then Tom, beautifully evoked that back in 2009 with some of the challenges that he had as he grew his club. But I think most of us have got at least one of those assets that, if we reframe it in the context of trying to get girls and women to come in and feel comfortable wanting to play football at our club, or even coming to support the team, I think that's a big opportunity for us.
Definitely. And I think whenever you're hosting events as well, just a quick one, is the sign up links. Try and gain that little bit of information, whether it's an email address or a contact number or so on, and then follow up and let people know about future opportunities as well. There are some really good free platforms out there. One is MailChimp, and if you haven't got a database but you want to start to build one, just log into MailChimp. It's free up until I think about 2,000 subscribers. So if you're at the start of your journey, utilize that. It's really user friendly, very simple. And I think that then just means that when you're having these interactions and you're holding those events, they can help you build a bit of a legacy rather than just these one-off occasions and these kind of little inclines and spurts in your engagement in the local community, whether that be for women and girls or disabled football. If you've got a long-term objective in your club where you want to build either fan engagement at your matches or get a women's team started, build disability provision, try and get those email addresses, obviously with all the GDPR regulations involved, and then talk to people and let them know about the opportunities that are coming up as well. And that's, you know, that's one tip that I would give, because in the past I've held events, they've been really successful, and then you're thinking, well, who have we had here? They've gone. So I wouldn't want people to miss out on that opportunity with the Euros coming up in the summer.
And thanks both of you. Obviously, I put you on the spot a little bit there, trying to piece together a real life case study, but there definitely is some resources available. The Let's Girls Play campaign is something that's still going really strong and backed by us at the FA and across the landscape. And we'll put all the links to this within the show notes when this goes on the League and Club Hub on YouTube. But what's going to be accessible there is a football festival guide. There's going to be fan zone guides for those that are playing or are located within the major host cities. There's project called Stepping Over the Sidelines. That's to encourage more females to get involved in coaching within their grassroots community and on the clubs. And there's also digital challenges that's going to be available for you to actually embrace at your club and cascade for you to be able to encourage delivering football festivals alongside the Euros taking place this July. So like I say, you can go search Let's Girls Play and find those resources online. If not, we will drop all those links within the show notes, as mentioned before. So we're coming towards the end of this webinar, and obviously, whilst we've still got these two fantastic guests with us, I just want to be able to plug what we've got coming up. So we've got another couple of extra time webinars taking place, one in June and one in July. And it's a 2-part themed series around who's your biggest signing this summer. So we're going to take a deeper dive into the one on the 9th of June, which is around players, and get some real live League and Club examples around how they actually market and communicate with those players to recruit them over the summer, because we know you'll have a massive drive, and obviously we'll use the Euros again as a bit of an example. And then on the 7th of July, it's that key one around volunteers. Mark's gives some unbelievable examples there from Ashton United, of Neem Valley Community Centre. We all need more volunteers, and I think because of the pandemic, like you did say, Mark, these people out there that are looking for a sense of purpose and wanting to give back to their community, we saw it happen tenfold, and people to continue that. I think there's still opportunity for clubs to embrace that passion and commitment to get involved. And I know, Charlotte, yourself at Bromley, have benefited from volunteers getting involved right into your grassroots coattails and the teams that you provide there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important summer coming up, a lot of opportunity. Whenever there's a tournament happening, you want to seize that and build a legacy and so around it. And I think now more so than ever with this summer, all the restrictions socially being relaxed, I think it's really important that we take that opportunity to boost participation. And when I say participation, I always mean in the broadest sense. I hung up my boots a very long time ago, but I'm still actively participating in football. And I think for volunteers and so on, this is a really great time to plan, to look ahead and to build teams off the pitch as well as on it.
Certainly is, Charlotte. And Mark, we've not done this with you before, but we want to be able to send in to you some of our quickfire questions that we usually ask our guests on In the Box. But seeing as though we've got you in it, it's not your first time with us. I'm sure people will be wanting and dying to know your answers to the following 3 questions. So I'm going to kick off with the first one. And we say quickfire, but no one can ever answer that quickly on these. But what does football mean to Mark Bradley?
Fresh air. Getting outside. Yeah, getting outside, getting outside, walking, traveling. Just, yeah, it's life, isn't it?
Oh, I love that answer. And what is the best thing that football has taught you?
Probably to take defeat as a learning opportunity, and to know there's always another day.
And the final one, Mark, is who's sort of the best person in football you know or you've come across? Who's that unsung hero? Or who's inspired and taught you the most?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there are so many of them. Obviously, there are lots of them. I mean, lots of people I've met over the years. I'm not going to name somebody. I'm just going to say that individual that is present at just about every single club that we visit, who makes your day. So somebody who walks up to you and says, "Not seen you here before. Is it your first game?" Or somebody that just starts up a conversation because you've just seen an amazing goal. Just this weekend, I was at a game up in Scotland, Annan Athletic, and the second Kelty Hearts goal was astonishing. And a complete stranger started chatting to me as a result of that. And we spent the next half an hour talking to each other. So it's the unnamed person that makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. What a great note to end on, Mark. Thank you so much for the expertise, the knowledge, all the examples you've shared so openly with us over this webinar as well. I've made plenty of notes, and I hope that everyone that's joined us has found it equally informative and inspiring as well. That's the one thing I think with marketing and communications. It's not about selling, it's just about the opportunity to engage and evolve. And yeah, we can't thank you enough for that.
Yeah,
And Mark, would you be kind enough? Oh, sorry, Mark. Would you be kind enough to tell those that are listening and joining us where they can go find out a little bit more about the Fan Experience Company? Because I know you've got your own podcasts and stuff that people should certainly go and listen to.
Yeah, the website is fanexperienceco.com. You can follow us on Twitter at fanexperienceco. And of course, I'd love to hear from you personally about your adventures, what you're doing, what you've learned. And that's Mark at fanexperienceco.com.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, Mark. And again, for those that was joining us, thanks ever so much for tuning in. We do have the League and Club Hub on YouTube, of which we do have a dedicated marketing and communications playlist. For myself and Charlotte, it's a pleasure as always, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. But we're going to leave you now with some top tips on marketing and communications that you can go and implement at your league or your club.